Could Groot actually take down the Incredibles? Let's find out. A lot of you guys liked last week's video, so I figured, hey, let me do another video based on this IP. And I remember this piece of fan art here being particularly popular, so I figured, seeing as how I'm the guy at this point who takes those matchups that people mention in passing and then analyzes them unironically to see who would actually win, I figured that a topic like this would be right at home here on the channel. So yeah, that's today's video. We're gonna basically analyze Groot from Despicable Me, his attack potency, his arsenal, his stats, to see if he has what it takes to take down the Incredibles. So if that sounds interesting to you, then be sure to stick around. As at the moment, I'm gonna implore you guys to subscribe to the channel. We're on the road to 100,000 subscribers, and we're really pushing it at the moment, almost at 90K. Thank you guys for all the support. And whether this is your first video, if you've been here since day one, I want to just take the time to thank you guys. Be sure to like the video as it spreads the video around so more people see it, and it helps us to create a bigger and stronger community. And hey, if you're still on the fence of joining said community, I post videos like this, shorts, daily polls, so you can get a lot of content out of me, especially considering the fact that it is free. So with that being said, let's get into the topic that you actually clicked the video to find out. Starting off with the Incredibles, as they seem to be all the rage, and their meta should be fresh in your mind considering last week's video. So let's quickly go over their stuff, and pretty much all of their metas just come from the fact that they scale to one another in one way, shape, or form, with Dash really being the only exception, as he's pretty much just human level with really fast speeds, as he doesn't really have anything impressive AP wise or durability wise for that matter. But even Violet is a character who, while seemingly on the same boat, has her shields, which can augment her durability obviously, as well as boost her AP, as she can use her shields to, bump into people and for attack. And I mean, these shields are so durable after all, they can tank multiple blows from the Omnidroid, which will be important later. But unlike their kids, Bob and Helen just kind of sort of scale to each other unironically. Obviously, they're not like equals in terms of AP and stuff, but Helen has shown multiple times that she's able to physically restrain Mr. Incredible, as well as characters that are comparable to him. And she's also shown the capacity to even harm him, so she scales to him to some degree, though it's unquantifiable. So for the most part, during the AP section, Bob will be our pillar, as by the start of the Incredibles film, he's noted to be out of his prime by multiple sources, but despite this fact, he's able to wreck the Omnidroid Mark 7, and while yes, his win was very situational, he still displayed relativity to the mech, being able to send it flying with his blows, as well as rip it apart. This is really impressive, as weaker models of the Omnidroid should be durable enough to endure blows from Hypershot, a character who had the ability to augment his fist output comparable to a Magnitude 6 earthquake, which, depending on how you would interpret this excerpt, would mean that his punch would be equivalent to 15 kilotons at a low end, to even as high as 294 megatons of TNT, due to the total seismic energy that these phenomena can produce. And seeing as how his ability is all about seismic manipulation, the latter end is pretty likely and just as viable as the low end, in my opinion anyways. And he actually ended up defeating a weaker Omnidroid, meaning that realistically we can infer that Syndrome made the subsequent models to be durable enough to endear his town to mountain level attacks. But either way, once again, out of shape Mr. Incredible would upscale this showing, and by the end of the film he's lost the weight and become closer to his prime. So considering the fact that said prime is stated to be the greatest soup of all time, the Incredibles would pretty much all roughly find themselves in those town and mountain level ranges, except for Dash after all. Violet is once again also a glass cannon, but at least she can boost her AP to comparable ends. But yeah, moving on to speed now, as it's all Dash kind of has. And I just want to point out that even regular human beings can react to light-based attacks, but if you don't want to use those showings quite yet, I'm not going to talk about the consistency. Multiple members of the team have been shown to be able to dodge lightning/electricity-based attacks, which would put them pretty deep into those hypersonic ranges. But going back to the lightspeed stuff, these guys are able to react to lasers, whether it's from the Omnidroid itself or even Jack. It really isn't an end of speed that is off the table for this character, or the verse for that matter. Dash, as the fastest of the group, should probably get those ends in terms of his combat and reaction speeds just to a deeper degree, but roughly for the most part, the entire team should be in those relativistic to FTL ranges. But with the consistent AP and speed covered, I want to address a high end that's been floating around, and pretty much it comes from a character known as Universal Man, a being who lost to the first Omnidroid, something that that's really impressive about this guy is that he can actually augment his durability to the point where his density would be comparable to near black hole levels, which would mean that in terms of his durability, he would be anywhere from those country to even multi-continental ends due to, you know, his proportions. I personally don't really mind scaling this to Mr. Incredible, so, you know, be happy about that. He gets a pretty big buff, as these same NSA files say that Mr. Incredible's durability is comparable to Universal Man stuff, but I have a hard time scaling it to a current Mr. Incredible, at least to that degree, as we don't really know how the Omnidroid Mark 1 beat Universal Man, and while we could infer that Syndrome should know Hypershock's AP due to seeing it firsthand, the fact that Universal Man couldn't even beat a single Omnidroid means that we have no idea if Universal Man got to show his full, you know, prowess out. And this guy is marked as pretty dumb, unironically, so, you know, a lot of people in the community have been saying that he just got caught off guard or something insane like that. And I mean, seeing how low his intelligence is certainly a possibility. So overall, I think when talking about the Incredibles team, it's safer to really just scale them off Hypershock to varying degrees rather than Universal Man, who, you know, probably is just an idiot and didn't get to augment his durability that far. But hey, at least Prime Bob gets a buff, and current Bob, who's comparable to his Prime, but to what degree we don't know, should probably get a decent bump as well. He's probably a little bit deeper in the mountain level, closer to Island maybe, but, you know, I don't see Helen or Violet's, you know, shields being in those multi-continental ranges due to this reasoning right here. So with the Incredibles covered for the most part, let's move on to Gru. If you remember my last time covering this verse, you'd remember how Despicable Me is surprisingly powerful. And this is probably because the series is a lot more out there than something like The Incredibles, that while inherently that's, you know, fantastical, it still leans into more realistic, grounded elements. Despicable Me, on the other hand, has got giant mechs, moons, shrinkages, dinosaurs, vampires, and even stuff like this, even before the end of the original trilogy. And if you remember this video, you'd know how I was able to find over half a dozen town to large town level feats. But to just refreshen some of you guys up, Vector is a character who is stated to be no physical threat to agents like Gru and Lucy, and even without that, the OG film implies that Gru, you know, is stronger than Vector, as he was just gonna pull up and beat him up. This is notable as Vector at the moment is the main way to get Gru's AP and speed scaling, as in the first film alone, he's able to endure being yanked by a rocket into outer space, and he's also able to tank the shockwave of the moon returning to its normal size, with both of these instances being in those town to large town level ranges. For the sake of consistency now, Gru's minions, who Gru should upscale individually, have multiple feats that get them in comparable ranges, as in the third movie they tank the popping of a massive wad of bubblegum, which is a town level feat. And in a short, the minions are portrayed to be able to survive a massive underground explosion that gets anywhere as low as 2 kilotons to even as high as 16 whole megatons of TNT. So we've already got potential city level metas for Gru and the minions. But it gets even crazier, as in the moon short, Vector attempts to launch himself from the moon to return to Earth, only to hit Gru's ship multiple times to the point where it causes an explosion powerful enough to launch Vector from the moon to Mars. So Vector's a character who can unironically survive an explosion point blank that's so potent and, you know, powerful that it sent him from the moon to Mars. And it sent him there in roughly a second using on-screen time. So when doing the math, it's been determined Vector was able to no-sell a blast that would be equivalent from anywhere between 855 gigatons to even as high as 1 whole petaton of TNT, which is anywhere between large island to continental. And once again, this is a character who Gru can beat up easily. Even if you don't think he scales to this, Gru's tech certainly does, as in no sort of blast of this magnitude. But getting to the topic of Gru's tech, all of his guns, bombs, and various, you know, mechanical vehicles should upscale his physical stats, meaning that Gru and his tech would unironically scale anywhere between town to even as high as continental. This wouldn't be too inconsistent, as he's already got the shrink ray, which can shrink moons, firepower potent enough that if augmented slightly by the minions of all people, it can produce solar flare like beams that can slice planets apart. And oh yeah, the minions tank this blast point blank, so if you want to argue it, it did happen. But just taking into account that this blast was able to slice the moon apart in this way, that's easily a large planetary feat. A yield of attack potency that's just shockingly consistent with the fact that guidebooks have stated that Gru has weapons that could destroy the world. As for speed, once again, vectors are pillar, being able to react to obstacles in real time while moving around the moon at massively hypersonic speeds. He's moving so fast here that it's actually bordering on relativistic, but for more consistency, Gru scales to El Macho, who can react to Gru's freeze ray, which in guidebooks is confirmed to be a laser. There's also the fact that Gru himself has a FTL instance. It's really funny, as during the party, he's able to blitz a beam of light faster than it can reach a certain point 3 times in a row. So yeah, Gru unironically has FTL scaling. We already touched on his minions' durability multiple times now, but I just want to point out that he's got hundreds of these guys, and I want to say in character he's probably got nearly a dozen or roughly around that number with him at any given time when he's on these evil missions or heroic missions. So with Gru covered for the most part, how would he do against the Incredibles? So when you look at it from a stats point of view, the speed between both parties is comparable, but in terms of AP, if you want to use consistent ends, the Despicable Me characters as well as their weapons would find themselves to be in those town to city level ranges, whereas if you want to use the Incredibles conservative ends, those guys get around mountain level. Mr. Incredible is just, objectively showing his AP and durability. Elastigirl somewhat scales to him. Violet shields can, be at that same level of power due to their scaling to the Omnidroid. So it's for this reason that I want to say that if the Gru were to pull up on the Incredibles on some Underminer timing, the Incredibles would be more than likely capable of defeating him, as they're way stronger than him. They're comparable in terms of speed as him, and Gru might be surprised fighting an actual team of superpowered beings. Usually it's just villains on villains, or they've got agents or cops chasing after them, not actual superheroes. Whereas the Incredibles are an experienced superhero team, and they've defeated tons of supervillains in the past. And I want to point out that this doesn't change at all, even if you grant Gru the island the continental scaling, as then we have Universal Man, who via his near black hole durability would upscale Mr. Incredible into those country to multi-continental ranges. And as previously mentioned, the other Incredibles have ways to somewhat kind of scale to him. So it's overall for this reason why I'd say that base to base in a random encounter. But if you want to take into account prep time, then I'm leaning towards Gru. As for starters, he has multiple ways of taking out the pars, as Incredibles 2 establishes. For example, Elastigirl can't really stretch if she's frozen or near freezing. Gru's got his freaking freeze ray, which is minus 100 degrees. So if she's shot with that, she's out of the fight. Gru's got his lipstick taser, which can one-shot characters such as El Macho, a character who would upscale Gru by a pretty decent extent. So if you want to believe that Gru is continental, that's possibly a multi-continental character right there. He's got tons of guns and weapons, so, they should be able to do the trick. And at worst, he could literally just shrink Mr. Incredible. He's got nothing to really, counter that. He's also got a legion of minions that tend to fluctuate in their durability. And we even have an instance of how all of Gru's weapons, when used in Tagnum, can create, solar flare-like constructs. So, Mr. Incredible is not surviving that either. So with that being said, I think the winner of today's video really just depends on circumstance. If Gru and the Incredibles were to, pull up on each other, no prep time, random encounter, I got the Incredibles. But if you give Gru some prep time, I would not be surprised in the slightest if he cooked up a couple of ways of defeating this team. But hey, what do you think of today's video? Do you think that I went Gru or downplayed the Incredibles, or even vice versa? Whatever your thoughts and feelings, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. But as always, I'll see you guys next week with another video. But until then, stay big G fans.